Welcome to the 2021 Mind the Gap Directors Panel, Directors Forum at Mill Valley Film Festival. Mind the Gap is Mill Valley Film Festival's gender equity initiative. We started it in 2015, and we are now regularly hitting over 50% women directors at Mill Valley Film Festival across all the whole program, shorts, features, documentaries, the whole thing. So we've made that commitment. And a part of it is that we've also, the last few years, been doing a directors forum. And here we are. So first of all, thanks to all of you who are here with us today. And I have to say, it's kind of a minor miracle to get you all together in the same place at the same time, even if that place actually is virtual. Nana, I know that you were able to get out of a rehearsal. Thank you for that. Maggie, Rebecca, Halle, thank you also for your, navigating what I know are crazy schedules, especially at this time of year. But what an amazing group of people. And if we were in Mill Valley right now, on Miwok territory, we'd be surrounded by redwood trees. Mount Tamalpais would be looking down at us. So I just want to invoke that for us as we continue in our virtual land here. And we have with us today Halle Berry, talking about her film Bruised, Maggie Gyllenhaal with The Lost Daughter, Rebecca Hall with Passing, and Nana Mensah with Queen of Glory. So I just want to acknowledge what an amazing group of filmmakers, what an amazing group of films. And I'd like just to get you started, for each of you just to tell us a little bit about what door opened or what stars aligned that meant that each of you could make this film now. I also want to say, as we go into this conversation, I would encourage you to talk with each other. This doesn't have to be question, answer, question, answer. Let's make it a conversation. But let's find out first, what began the journey for you? Halle, do you want to take that first with Bruised?
Sure. First of all, thank you for that. I'm so honored to be here with you and all of these ladies. It's an exciting time for women in film. And this is proof of that we're afforded opportunities now that, we haven't been before. So thank you for having me and us. But for me, I didn't really set out to direct this film. I'm grateful now that I had the opportunity, but I didn't really set out to do that. For my debut, I would have never chosen to star in it as well. This became the choice because I really couldn't find a director that saw it like I saw it. And I knew that to create a character, a fighter, something that was really foreign for me, I play an MMA fighter in my film. I knew that I would have to work harder than I had ever worked on a physical level. I knew that a lot would be required as an actor. So to try to direct and then have it be my debut just seemed like suicide. Like, who would choose to do that? So when I couldn't find a director that really understood the story the way I was able to reimagine it, it finally became clear that I was the keeper of the story and that I understood it more deeply than anybody. And I started to realize it's because it kind of is, in a way, a story that I fundamentally and intrinsically know, because part of it was solidly me. So by realizing that, the only choice was for me to direct it. And I have to say, it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, to direct and star and be my debut with a monster fighting role like this. But now that it's over, it was a huge challenge, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And to have a female voice in an old age genre, the fight game, it's been, littered with men throughout time with these movies. And so to have a female voice and a female character and an African-American woman, we've never seen that either. It gave me a chance to be a part of doing something that really hasn't been done before. And that was exciting.
That's great. And Nana, you also are in your film. You took on, more than just directing. So tell us a bit about how your film began, Queen of Glory.
Yeah, I was nodding enthusiastically at Halle because that very much a lot of truth is being told. I feel as we say in Ghana, I ended up directing my film by force. I did not intend to direct. I did not intend to star in it. I wrote it. I wrote it as a writing sample, and was gonna sell it, and then ended up kind of doing everything on it, and that was hugely taxing. It's a lot. I don't think I'll ever do it again. I mean, now I'm saying this in a recorded, medium, so I will maybe eat my words, but I don't think I'll do it again. It was a little bit too much to direct, write, and star in the film, but I, similar to Halle, was trying to find somebody who understood my vision, and either the directors I spoke to wanted to make it, much darker than tonally than I was looking for, or, ultimately it just ended up having to be me. And on the other side of it, incredibly grateful. So glad I survived, but it's hard. It's hard.
Great. Maggie, you wrote and directed, but you did not act in your film. So tell us a little bit again about how the film began.
Well, I think it's so interesting that all of us are actresses. Because
we'll go there in a minute, right?
Well, I guess I think when I look back on it now that in some ways, I had never really allowed myself to consider the possibility of being a director. It's sad to say this, but I think somewhere I didn't feel entitled to that. I think I have always been a storyteller as an actress. And I think in some ways it was almost like 150 years ago, if you were a medical minded person and you were a woman, you were going to become a nurse. And I think in some ways, if you were a storyteller and you were, interested in film and you're a woman, well, go be an actress and try to get it in as an actress. And I think as an actress, it's interesting. My experience is, and I wonder what you guys think about this. You sort of think, okay, I think there are 20 things I probably need in order to make this scene really sing as an actress. And I'm like, okay, I'll ask for 2 of them. I'll sneak 3 of them. I'll kind of see what else I can get. But, you'll get 70% of what you need, and you'll have to be okay with that. And as a director, I was actually stunned. I kind of went in expecting a similar experience, and I realized, no, I can have all of what I want. I mean, of course you have to compromise, and some of the compromises are beautiful, but everyone's there. Everyone's helping you shift and change what you want, support what you want, in a way that's very different than my experience as an actress. So I forgot what you asked me, but I just thought it was so interesting listening to these women. I never could have ever possibly imagined acting in my film and directing it. I felt like the pleasure of just observing these incredible actors from a totally different perspective, seeing every single 16th note of what they were bringing. I just couldn't have done it. I don't know how you guys did that. I don't know how you did it.
Yeah, I have to say I feel the same way. I know you're probably about to ask me, so I'm really trying so much with what Maggie's saying. I mean, I always wanted to direct since I was a tiny girl, and I sounds ridiculous, but I knew what it was. My father was a theatre director, so I sort of understood what directors did. But there was so much. I mean, I had to go on whatever journey I had to go on to get to this point, and it's taken me a long time. And certainly the genesis of this film was long. I mean, I wrote the first draft of the script 13 years ago, but it was entirely personal. I did it because I was going through a time in my life when I was understanding a certain amount of personal stuff that related to it. My grandfather was Black and passed white his entire life. And he passed that on to my mother and me. And, I've kind of gone through my life sort of not really understanding it, not really knowing what it was about. And then I read this book and it suddenly gave me language and context. So when I wrote the script, it was purely for me. It was selfish. So I could just spend some more time with this book. And get to grips with it, because it unlocked so much for me. I mean, it's not just Nella Larson uses she telegraphs that it's about racial passing, but it's really about any way in which anyone's insides don't match up with their outsides. If you're ambivalent about being a mother, how to be a woman, how to, your sexuality, all of these things come into it. And I found that so fascinating. So I stuck it in a drawer and just sort of went, well, that was nice. I'll think about that again one day. I knew I wanted it to be in black and white. I knew I wanted it to be 4:3 aspect ratio. I had all these sort of very ambitious formal ideas, and it sort of, it felt too much to have that be my first film. It felt too, well, no one's going to let me do that. And well, they didn't for several years, actually, as it turns out, but then they did.
Well, it's funny you say that. May I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it, please.
I'd love to ask all the ladies, because you brought up something really interesting when you say, well, who's going to let me do that? Because I felt that way too. Who's going to let me tell a story about the fight game? Like, I've never directed before. That's a huge undertaking. Who's going to let me do it? So my question for you guys, and I wonder if you experienced what I experienced. How hard was it to raise the money? And did you raise the money? How did you get the mechanics of your film going? Because I had a really hard time convincing people that they should give me money to tell this story. Not only give me, a first-time director, but give me money to tell this story, because it was so male-driven in the past. And I felt like they questioned if anybody would be interested in a female version of what they considered a male-dominated sport, right? So it was really hard. And I struggle with, was it because I was a woman? Was it because I was Black? Or was it because I was a Black woman? Like, what was it really? Why was my journey so hard? So what was your journey in raising the money and sort of getting it all, off the ground?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lack of imagination, right? Like, a lot of times when you want to do something that doesn't fit in the mold, and I feel like our films don't fit in any particular mold. So I think that is part of it. It's show business, not show art. And so, people are just looking at their bottom line and how they can, so that's how I interpret it. But to answer your question about the specific journey, we had to scale down what it was that I wanted to do and how I had to do it. And there were a lot of compromises that were made in execution because there just wasn't the money. And we actually had to go on hiatus because we ran out of funding. And then my producers and I, who were all creative producers, ended up like getting quite lucky working, on other people's projects, and then came back and put in the money ourselves to finish and get us over the line. So that was like, the Cliff Notes version of my journey.
Right. So you put in your own money?
I did.
You did. Yeah, me too.
I don't know. One thing it makes me think of is my husband was telling someone last night, he said, tell them how much you went over budget. And it was something like $150. And, it was like, we're in my final mix and we needed an extra hour. And I was like, come on, fuck it. I will pay $150. Like, just let me get this right.
Exactly the same thing in my mix. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah. But my producer, I have two producers who are partners who we partnered together, and they're amazing. And she was saying to me, she was like, as a producer, a woman, a female producer of independent movies, you cannot go over budget. You do not have that luxury. I mean, $150, I was sort of like, oh yeah, we can. But the truth is I think there is this kind of like we have to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. I really found, as I became a director, which happened, as we were in pre-production, and then again as we were in production, and then again as we were in post, I learned so much. I stopped doing this thing, which I'm 43 years old. I've been a woman in this world for a while. Like I stopped doing this thing, which when I was trying to get financing, I was sort of like, it's small, it's little. We don't need much. Just give us a little and we'll make it work. We know how to compromise. So there's that. And then the other side of it was also this thing that we all had, me and my two producing partners, which was like, okay, I know you said no about whatever it is, financing or some tiny detail of production, maybe no, but I have learned that you have to go around and through and over in order to get things done. So like, I'm not going to accept no the first time. I'm going to accept no. Okay. The 10th time it's impossible. Okay. We won't shoot on 35 millimeter. Okay. But like, you know, I think by the end I stopped going like, this is just small. Don't worry. I don't need much, you know, but that's how I began. And that's how I got my financing.
Right.
I mean, it's so crazy, like how we enter rooms in that like kind of servant archetype or like the like, please, can I? And I feel like that plagued me throughout my process as well. I think that's something, I think it's very gendered. Yeah, I think it's so gendered.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think it is very gendered. I mean, I definitely had an experience of, you know, it was a period film and it was black and white, and that's not cheap. And the budget that initially I wanted was, you know, very quickly became impossible because nobody wanted to take the gamble on it. They'd considered it too controversial, too arty, and and so I got down to this sort of crunch point where everybody said to me, we love the script, we love all the actors, this is incredible, it's going to make a great movie. Can you just make it in color? And then you'll have the budget you want. And I was like, I can't because it doesn't work. This isn't about a cool choice, this black and white stuff. It's kind of integral to the whole idea of the thing. It's taking it to an abstracted space. It allows me to cast black women as these characters. It allows me to play with shade and tone, all this stuff. Yeah. So it was impossible and I couldn't do it. So then, you know, I did have to make the biggest compromise that I think, you know, that you can make. And it was a question of you either make it for very little money and you make it how you want to make it, or you make a different film for, you know, a comfortable amount of money. And so, you know, we had to make it tier 1 and all the rest of it. And I feel I feel weirdly guilty that we pulled it off, because I don't want any other period film to have to make this amount of money. You know, it's not right. We should have had more. But we managed to do it. But because people manage to do things doesn't mean it's, you know, then becomes the standard.
Did you read the Mike Nichols biography? Because he had exactly the same thing with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I was so inspired by that biography. I was cutting when I was reading it, and I was like, what? They went like $2 million over budget, like on the third day, like what? He's almost sunk the studio, you know. But he does this thing in the book where they say, you know, the studio is gonna throw Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf away unless he'll shoot it in color, and he's a baby. It's his first movie, and he says, "Okay, I'll go home. I'm not shooting in color."
Love that.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to stick to your guns. It's tough though, sticking to your guns sometimes. Especially
Rebecca, were you ever tempted? Did you ever flirt with the idea, or was just a unilateral no? Wow.
It wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been the film. It wouldn't have been the film. I didn't. You know, it always occurred to me that the most interesting way to make a movie about colorism was to take all the color out of it and just make the whole thing abstract. So you're drawing attention to the construct of this and the slippery nature of all these things, and you're just, you know, it becomes a translation, it becomes a different thing, poetic as well. But so it was non-starter.
But I think it's also, at least for me, I found there were certain things I could compromise on, and then there were certain things like I absolutely could not compromise on. I'm sorry, I can't, you know. And the ones you can compromise on, it's great, you know. I'm like, I don't need to see the car crash. Whatever budget money you just put in for that, just throw it away. I don't care about that. You know, I think that's,
and you know, and I agree with you, Maggie, because you know what I found making mine too? I got lost money left and right. And what it did though, was force me to even be more creative. You know, I've worked on movies with big budgets and I see how it goes. And sometimes it feels like it's a bit on rote. When you're working within a budget and the confines of a budget, I found that my creativity skyrocketed because I thought, okay, I don't have money for this, but this is very important. Got to do it. How can I do it with what I have? And I think the film benefited from that. At the end of the day, there's some things that was like, wow, never would have done it that way. And I think, well, I had to. But it's actually wonderful that I had to do it that way. So sometimes those things can be, it depends on how we look at it
Mother
as well.
No, I really agree that, I didn't have the luxury of the budget of doing huge set pieces, and everyone thinks of the 20s as like big, noisy jazz age stuff. And I wanted to be counterintuitive about it anyway. I wanted to actually show New York as quite claustrophobic and quiet and small from the perspective of a woman's mind who is sort of trapped and can't see out properly. But, it necessitated that anyway, coming up with sort of creative ideas to set the place and the time without actually showing kind of a big cityscape or whatever. It was actually wonderful. And I loved it.
I was really struck by that when I was watching Passing about that, the sound, like that was it was so meditative.
A big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
I haven't seen your film yet. I'm really excited to see it anyway. That's exciting.
You guys are at London, right?
In fact, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you gonna be there?
I'll be there. Yeah. But yeah, so it's crazy to me that that filmmaking isn't a unilaterally feminine undertaking, because we always have to negotiate and kind of be like, oh, there's a barrier, I'm going to go around. Whereas I feel like the very masculine energy of blowing through things doesn't apply. So it's why is it only women who make films? We're so well suited to it.
That's so true. Yeah.
Sounds like some of the creative decisions you were making, I'm wondering if you were making them before you actually made the film. So, like Maggie, you decided not to do a car crash beforehand, or if there were things that you actually discovered essentially in real time. I'm also just really interested in what you're saying in the context of how women make films versus how that sort of, the male set pieces have been set for years and years and years. And it sounds like you are, busting those stereotypes. I'm thinking also when Ava DuVernay made Selma, she talked about how men shoot explosions. And she very consciously chose to shoot that very, very differently at the beginning of the film. So are there things that you discovered, by dint of being very creative or necessity? Did you discover these things in the writing process or in the moment?
I started discovering mine very early in the writing process while I didn't actually write the script. When I got the script, it was written for a 21-year-old Irish Catholic white woman. So I sat down with the writer and totally reimagined the world and sort of wrote with her, but reimagined it for someone, one like me, my age, my race. But also I had to write it because I knew I wouldn't have a lot of money to make this movie. So I also had to write it to fit the budget that I knew I would have. And being a fight movie, you have to have a big fight in every movie. And there's fights that lead up to that. So I had to figure out a way to shoot this fight very differently than I've seen other fight films be shot, because one, I didn't have the money, but I also wanted to tell it from a different point of view. For me, that was the only reason to redo a film in a genre where so many great movies by some of our greatest directors have been made. I had to keep it from a woman's point of view. I had to shoot it from a woman's point of view, which made it more intimate, which made it smaller, not only because of the budget, but because I thought that was the right way to tell it from my perspective, from a female point of view. And it wasn't just about a fight. It's about so much more than the fight. The fight was almost the aftermath of the story. It culminated in this big fight, but it was really a woman's journey of being a fighter. And as a woman, I decided, let's go straight to what it is for us. And it's not just, women don't fight to get money or be the breadwinner of the family. I found that women actually fight to get their voice back and get their power back. So I wanted the story to be about what her real journey would be, being a mother, figuring out who she was, dealing with her past demons, her pains, her hurt, her sense of feeling marginalized. And then the fight became a necessity for her survival. She wasn't just fighting for the sake of fighting. She was actually fighting to live, to actually survive her circumstance. So I had to put all of that up front, because one, I knew what I would be facing when I got ready to shoot.
I'm going to riff off that for a minute, because Maggie, you were noticing that all of you are actor directors now. And to me, it's kind of extraordinary that this year, all four of you have moved from acting into directing for the first time. I mean, it's a phenomenon. You guys are a phenomenon. But just sort of listening to you talk, Halle, you're talking about essentially imagining something as an actor. So for each of you coming into this work, what are the parallels between your process as an actor that informed your process as a director?
I have something to say about that. I actually found that my process, whatever that exactly is, as an actress, really served me as a writer. I think that the sort of muscle, the skill of taking a text, which could be phenomenally interesting, it could be a Carol Churchill play where there's no scaffolding and you have to fill everything in yourself. Or it could be something awful where you're like, how am I going to find the essence? Either way, what you're looking for is the essence of why is this scene in this story now? What am I expressing that must be expressed in this scene? So you're kind of like looking for the seed inside it as an actor, and you can choose what that is. That's where being an actor is directorial. You could have a scene, if you want it to be, you could have a scene of, two people ordering a sandwich at a deli counter, and you can decide as an actress, oh, this is a seduction, or this is an apology, or whatever you want. And that will really affect the purpose of the scene. So I did an adaptation. I think, Rebecca, you did too. I don't know if you guys were all adapting, but particularly in terms of an adaptation, I was taking a section of this book that I had a huge amount of respect for and interest in, and going like, why this section, why this piece in this story now? And how can I then sort of translate it into something new? So I felt being an actress in terms of writing really, really helpful. Also, as an actress, I never, ever, maybe rarely want to literally say, I don't want anything to be literal. I always want the conversation to be happening up here so that you can fill it in with 100,000 other things. And that's how I wrote my script for actors who like that. Probably not every actor does, but that's what I wrote it for.
I do. I very much chime with what you're saying, certainly about adaptation. I suppose also I found that there's a kind of acting for me seems to be somewhere between this sort of very analytical muscle, sort of intellectual game of logic and this and that, and something that's purely instinctive and emotional. And I found that my sort of gut reader was the most helpful with adaptation, although you need the analytic stuff too, because there was this sense of how does this book make me feel, which is something that I think put myself in as an actor, and how do I, and then it became a sort of whatever, I don't know this is how I feel it should be written. Is it making me feel the same thing? Yes, I'm feeling that thing. I was very feeling my way into it. It's quite a sensual book, so there was a lot of sensuality to that as well. It felt correct.
I think editing was like that unconscious thing that you're talking about. I felt like editing was I loved editing. I loved my editor. I loved that whole process. I felt like what was guiding me was so much that unconscious part, that poetic part, which is maybe part of why I loved it so much. The intellectual side, I felt like I was way less into that when I was cutting. I wonder how you guys felt editing, what your experiences were.
I too, like you, loved the editing. I did it for so long too. I felt like I had the luxury. I started editing right when COVID started. So it was the new way of editing. I was very rare, hardly ever with my editor. We were doing it all via, Zooms or through all these different new editing programs that we can use. So, and I only saw my film on a computer screen for the first 6 months. And then somebody said, oh, you need a bigger screen at home. So then I got a 55-inch screen and I thought I was really doing big things. But it was a process where I felt like I could reimagine. I could take what we shot and I can sort of rework it, reimagine it. I could change things about it. I could make new decisions now in the editing process. I wasn't limited to what we decided on the day. I realized that the movie really does get made in the edit. and as an actor, I now understand how come, when as actors, we give a performance, but it's really out of our control. How we come off in the movie, how the movie ultimately comes together, how the story is told. And I realized in the edit for the very first time why that happens. And I was very protective of these performers and their work and what we had talked about. And I didn't want to be that director where they come to me and they say, that is not at all what we talked about. That's not what I planned, because it's happened to me before. And I thought, wow, this is just not what I did. Like, what happened to the performance? And so as a director, now that I was the puppeteer, I was very concerned and very protective of those performances while wanting to keep the big vision alive. And being an actor, it made me very protective of them and their art and what they gave me and what they did.
Were there any places for you? I really relate to that. I also felt like I was holding these performances in my arms the entire time. But I'm curious for all of you guys, imagining as actresses, you had the same experience. Were there any places where you were like, oh, I love this, but it's gotta go?
I know, it was heartbreaking. Yes. I had so many babies die on a day.
So many. So many.
Before it did, I had like a 4-hour movie. And they were like, no, Halle, you can't have a 4-hour movie. I'm like, not even if there's an intermission? No, those days are over.
Gather it up and the cutting room floor will end up being your sequel. Like, let's just go for it. Like, there's a whole other film on the cutting room floor for me.
Yeah. And I imagine going to those performers and saying, oh my God, that was so good, but we just didn't have time. And that was also hard, Maggie, to your point. It was hard to make those cuts because I loved all of the characters so much and saw all sides of them, but realized when putting the movie together, all sides couldn't be all sides couldn't be reflected. And you had to leave some ability for who these characters were. You couldn't show it all the way you intended. And that was hard. That was a hard part of the edit. Yeah.
How was it cutting yourselves? Sorry, I'm just...
No. I was actually going to say that. Like, it was so... We got a couple of days in an actual editing suite. And then COVID, we had to go and do it remotely. And I loved the physical being in the room with the editor, and like you're in this dark room, and it's just so like, I don't know, kind of weirdly gestational. Like, it's just it's so with sound and everything, it's so beautiful. But then the Zoom, I think picking the right editor has a lot to do with this, right? Like, I was so inspired by him, and he really got. Because I did write, direct, and star in it, there wasn't a lot of room for other people's interpretations. And so when I finally got into the edit, like, it was really me handing off this egg to someone, and he like totally took it and he got it and he brought new ideas to it. And it was really a collaboration. And my background is theater. So it was so delicious to be able to just be like in collaboration with another artist and seeing my editor as such, rather than like a technician. I think I'd always thought of them as like technicians before, and not really giving a lot of space to their artistry and until this. So that was a really delightful realization.
Yeah, I hated the Zooms. I didn't even end up doing Zooms. I mean, we had about 3 weeks, maybe more, about 3-4 weeks in a room together, which was such a blessing. And then we went into this funny thing where we'd work on these segments, and I would be incredibly prescriptive. I probably sometimes saw my editor as too much like a technician, but she was very generous and tolerant of me. I'd be like, at 2.57, take 5 frames off and then move. But then I'd have this blissful, I'm sure we all go through those moments where it gets very nitty gritty, but then I loved the pandemic because I'd have this blissful sort of 2 hours while Sabine worked on it and then uploaded it, and it would take 2 hours for it to be properly uploaded. And this pause in the day, I found heaven. I loved the room, being with her in the room, but also I suffer slightly from, classic introvert tendency. Doesn't suit being a director. I think much better when I'm completely on my own. And the 2 hours meant I could just walk in the garden and have this kind of you know, do the math in my head and just play out the scene in quiet, and then come back and see it and then give the note and then have another waiting time. And I love that. And I know it will never be replicated, but I loved it.
You could put it in your contract for your next film.
I know it made me really crazy and difficult. I need, for every 5 minutes the film edited, I need 2 hours in the garden.
2 hours in the garden. Yeah.
It's not going to work.
So the other thing that strikes me about actors becoming directors, you know, or especially women who are acting, is that it allows you to take control of your own life, you know, that you can actually start writing, directing work of the kind that you might want to see, or the kind that maybe has never been available to you, that you want to see happening in the world. And it gives you, you know, a little bit more power. And I love, you know, like Maggie, you know, at the very beginning, you were talking about not feeling entitled to be a director. So I'm wondering, why do you think this is a moment when all of you are moving into the world of directing or producing, actually, and writing as well, but making work? I mean, is this a moment? Is this a thing?
I'll say this, for me, after Time's Up and Me Too, my whole world, the way I thought about being a woman in the world completely changed. And I realized how we had been silenced and how we were carrying these secrets and how we were being emotionally abused and physically abused. And we were believing that, you know, somehow we deserved this, or this is just how it was. And that whole time woke me up to myself and made me realize that I could no longer be silent or absent. I had to stand up for myself. I had the right to stand up for myself. I had the right to dream the biggest dream, and I had the right to do it and be seen and be heard. And I think that's what started it for me. And I think the world was forever changed because of that movement and how all of those women came into the light. And I didn't know when I would direct. I certainly didn't think it would be this movie, but I knew that I now had to tell stories. I had to put my point of view as a woman and as a Black woman into the world. It was my responsibility at that point, and that I had to fight for the right to do that. And that's what clicked it on for me.
Yeah, when you asked that question, I thought, just sort of somewhere in my head, I thought it was Donald Trump, which is the same as what you're saying. It was like being able for somebody to say, women love it when you grab their pussies, and then there's no consequence to that. I was like, oh, fuck no. And I think somehow something opened up in me where I went, yeah, what have I been accepting, and what do I want, and what do I want to say? And listen, I think that there are women who make films that are an imitation of the films that have come before us, that are in the language of, you know, that was written by somebody else. There are, and then there are women who make films and television and write novels and songs that are fundamentally feminine. And I know not everybody agrees with me on this. So many interesting women have disagreed with me on this, but I think there's such a thing as feminine filmmaking, feminine novels.
The thing is the female gaze, which I think is the speaks to your point, and I think that's real. I agree.
Yes.
Well, what's our experience in the world? How is it different? You know, I think it is different, and I think the expression of that experience, if we're listening to ourselves, if there's space made for us to listen to ourselves, is a different expression.
Yes, and I know that's true, Maggie, because when I was making my film, just in the writing process, I had some of the men that were around me would constantly question me and say, well, this doesn't sound right. And I would say, duh, because it's not your point of view. It's a female point of view. You don't understand this at all. I get it. But that's exactly why this is what I'm trying to put in the world, to have a female gaze on a old age subject. But that's when I knew that I was on the right track, because they didn't get it. And I knew that I was presenting a different perspective and a different view of something that they thought they knew from their own point of view. And I realized in this process too, how many times as women, we've been editorialized, or our stories have been told from the male gaze, but it's not really ours. And we've, gone along with that, and we've portrayed that, but we were also in the process betraying ourselves, because deep down, I think I've always known that that wasn't true for me, but I accepted that this is what I had to do. But I always have known it's not true.
It gives you this weird feeling, though, when all the representations of your experience in the world, or many of them, are a little off. It made me feel like maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I feel a little too much, or a little beyond it. Maybe I'm the one who's off. And I think there's really something comforting to me about seeing work made by women that expresses an experience that I actually relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Which is why I'm so excited that you all are here, and this is what we're doing, and we're fighting to do this, no matter what the restraints were, what the complications were, whatever we had to do to get our little movies to get to this point. That means we are moving forward. We're standing up, we're realizing our stories have value, and I'm super excited by that. I'm super excited.
And for our children. I mean, yes. Rebecca and I, who we were just, I'll say it on the TV. Like, we don't know each other very well, but we have a mutual friend. We both have daughters. Her daughters are wearing my daughter's clothes.
Yeah.
Really? Clothes, how beautiful for them that there will be stories in the world that they will be able to relate to. How comforting for them.
And guess what? I have a little son. I want him to see stories from a female gaze. I want him to grow and be a little boy and grow up into a man who can really understand, outside of his gender, understand how we feel as women. That will make him just a better human being by understanding that through the art. So it's important for the boys too.
Absolutely. I also have a son. He's 9 weeks old, so we're not there yet. But we will.
We're just starting.
Yes, we're starting early. He's going to be a feminist.
And you're doing all of this press with a 9-week-old baby.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I know. It's like what they said about Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, that she did everything that Fred Astaire was doing backwards and in high heels, as you all are doing. And I love this conversation. I wish it could last forever. But I know that you're extremely busy, and we have to say goodbye. But I just want to say, first of all, thank you to each of you for all the work you've ever done, for the amazing work that you're doing now, for the amazing work that you'll continue to do into the future. And just to acknowledge that, under any circumstances, making a film is kind of it's a miracle, but to do it as a multi-hyphenate, as a director, writer, actor, producer, blah-de-blah-de-blah, which all of you are doing, to do it as a woman, to do it as a woman of color, it's radical. It's amazing. So you, in my book, are all goddesses. I bow down to you. And thank you so much for being with us today. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Zoe.
And thank you, ladies.
Thank you, ladies, so much. What a pleasure.
Yes,
really.
Yes. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of your films.
Yeah,
I cannot wait. Yes, I wish you much success with all of your work this year.
You too, all of you guys.
Thank you.